Let's go to the women's side, Megan. Recap. I mean,
My gosh.
so much
Insane.
happened, but where do you begin?
A lot's happening. I mean, where did we begin? Was really surprised. We'll begin where I was. I was at Ohio State. Was shocked that they lost to Duke. Really good Duke team. Like, went to the Sweet 16, deserved it, all the things. They outplayed Ohio State in that game. But it felt like Ohio State had the team and the region where they could get to a Final Four. So obviously frustrating that they fell short in that round of 32 game. You look at, getting 7 teams in from the Big Ten to the NCAA tournament, and was really impressed with Iowa. I will say at the very beginning of it, I did not think they were going to make the Final Four. Thought their regional was too hard, thought they weren't playing great basketball. But after they got out of the first and second rounds, it was like something clicked and they started playing elite basketball. You look at what they did against LSU, how locked in that team was. And Gabby Marshall after the game was like, I have never wanted to beat a team so badly. And I've never been so locked in my entire life to a game. This whole entire season, like Iowa has handled the Caitlin Clark phenomenon with so much grace and hasn't allowed it to seep into the locker room. Like it takes a lot. There's at the end of the day, like no matter what team you're on, there's going to be egos. And everybody was able to put their ego aside in order to allow this great player to shine the way she did this year. So I give them a ton of credit. Sydney Falter and Kay Martin were 2 X factors down the stretch. I mean, you can't say enough about, especially Sydney Falter. When Molly Davis went down on senior day, I didn't know what Iowa was going to look like. She was such a huge piece all season long. Sydney Falter comes into the starting lineup, and not only is she still doing all of like the dirty work, diving on the floor, she's now scoring. And then you have that with Kate Martin, her ability to shoot the 3 down the stretch. I was so impressed with and so happy for her because I know how hard she's been working on developing that 3-point shot more consistently. So you put all these pieces together. Caitlin Clark did not disappoint whatsoever. And that's what's so crazy, Zora. We've talked about this. No matter how big the moment is, like Caitlin Clark shows up every game. I've never seen that before. I think as a great player, you're entitled to have a day off or so, or an off night, but she has never had an off night. Like that's not who she is. And she doesn't get nervous. And I don't know how she is such a machine when she's out there, but it is a spectacle. And the last thing I will say is this: for those who say that she's not the greatest college basketball player of all time because she hasn't won a national championship, I think it's a very hard comparison to make between GOATs and winning championships and the pros in college. In college, you got to play more individual games to make it to that point. And Caitlin Clark didn't play with All-Americans. She was the only All-American on her team. She's the only McDonald's All-American on her team. She played with really good Big Ten players, but not as good as you look at like the UConns and the Tennessees and the LSUs who have had All-Americans on their team and made it all the way to the championship games and won titles. The fact that Caitlin Clark, with a quote-unquote less talented roster, got her team to back-to-back national championships. In my mind, that makes her the greatest player of all time in college.
You can't, and now no one will ever wear 22 again at Iowa. The university announcing that they're going to, rightfully so, retire her number. I don't even know where Caitlin starts to reflect. I have trouble reflecting. Again, we were there for some big moments, but not all the moments, right? And so, what a season! Not just for the Hawkeyes, but for women's basketball as a whole, and specifically the Big Ten. There was so. I mean, you talk about a team like Michigan State, right? And a new coach with a new philosophy and what they were able to do. Indiana, just some really, really good teams. Ohio State coming up short. Could you argue that maybe they peaked too early? I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's such a fantastic regular season. Who am I missing? Michigan, they Indiana. Just simply want to get into the tournament, right? Indiana.
And Indiana put up a fight against South Carolina. That was a 4-point game with 2 minutes to go.
They did. Yeah. You can't say enough about Mackenzie Holmes. I mean, it's just a great – I'm such a believer and a fan of this league. The Big Ten is it when it comes to basketball on both sides. And that showed itself. National championship game. There was no other conference had two teams. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got UConn and Purdue on one side, so that's Big East and Big Ten, and then you had SEC and another Big Ten team on the women's side in the national championship game. So just superb season all around.